The incident at Karbala is a very kind of conflicted and very polarized event of conflict, in which the matter of succession was brought to the forefront, but a lot of the acts that had been committed during the whole second fitna, as it's called, or the second Muslim civil war, kind of led to many acts which weren't really understood as being in any ways justified across the Muslim spectrum, right? Across multiple communities in the Islamic world. And it's regarded as one of the most tragic incidents in which helpless babies and helpless people, helpless women were in fact martyred at the plain of Karbala. So I'm going to be talking about what can we learn from this entire incident, and also before that I'll be talking to you a little bit about what led to these events. So I'm going to be glossing over many of the things, so you can probably find better sources for this, for the longer version of this whole incident. So after the fourth caliph's death, Ali's death, what happened was that there was a kind of rift between Amir Muawiyah and Imam Hussain, who was the son of Ali. So this rift kind of resolved in such a way that Imam Hussain said that to Muawiyah, that okay, I will forego my claim to the caliphate if you agree to the fact that any person that comes after you has to come based on consultation and not on a monarchical format. So Muawiyah couldn't nominate his son as the next caliph. That's basically what this whole treaty was about. So at the end of Muawiyah's rule, he nominated his son as the next caliph. So you can see how this thing kind of opened up a rift between the Umayyads and a lot of people who kind of followed that Imam Hussain and Muawiyah treaty. So as a result of this claim, Imam Hussain, who was the younger brother of Imam Hussain and also the younger son of Hazrat Ali, kind of conflicted against this. He had a conflict against this. He did not yield to Yazid. So in fact, as Yazid's reign began, many people in Kufa, which is a kind of constituency, or a province of the Islamic Empire at that time. So many people in Kufa kind of were sending letters to Imam Hussain, and they were telling to him that you may come here and we recognize your claim to the throne instead of Yazid. So as a response, Imam Hussain kind of placed some of his informants over there, and in the start, these informants gathered a little bit of support, but after a certain time, when Yazid saw these things happening, and when he saw that the governor of Kufa wasn't really doing anything, he replaced the governor with another one. Now, his name was Ibn Ziyad, and he clamped down on these movements, and so that whole revolt was dampened, and in the end, the person who was in charge of that revolt, his name was Ibn Aqil, who was also an informant of Imam Hussain, was killed. However, all of these progressions were kept away from Imam Hussain, so he didn't understand that these things were currently going on in that place. So regardless, after heeding the letters from Kufa, he decided that he should go over there, against the advice of many of his companions. So what happened was that when he arrived at Kufa, he was confronted by an army of 1,000 men, and he claimed at that point, Imam Hussain claimed, that I had come here because your people had given me letters that they consider me as their imam or their leader instead of Yazid. So, but the commander of the army denied this. And over the next few days, what happened was that they guided Imam Hussain. They said that either you should swear fealty to Yazid, or you can just go away, right? You cannot return to Medina, but you can go someplace else. So they kind of guided this 1,000 men army and another army that was led by another commander of 4,000 men. So both of these kind of surrounded Imam Hussein's camp, which contained only about 72 people. And this was at the plain of Karbala. Now, what happened after that, what happened in the next 8 days or so, was some of the was an example of how brutal human nature can be. So this camp, which consisted of 72 people, including women and children, they were left to be thirsty for about 3 days. And at the end of it all, it kind of resolved after multiple tries at gaining some sort of common ground. At the end, Shimr kind of led the attack in certain ways, led the philosophical attack at least, kind of charged the people up to fight against Imam Hussain and try to neutralize him. So at the end of the fight, Imam Hussain, according to many men that followed him, were killed and they were mutilated and decapitated. This was a very brutal incident overall. Now, what can we learn from this incident in general? So the first thing that I could think of, that we could glean some sort of insight over here, is that strong beliefs, even if they are based in reality, even if they are based on proper rules and regulations, you are always going to find people who move against you. In fact, it could also be said that the stronger the belief and the stronger the drive for you to, in some ways, act on that belief, the more opposition that you will face. This was evident in the entire incident in its entirety. So the second point that we can learn from this particular thing is about remaining as informed as possible. So, for example, I talked about how the people in Kufa were talking about, were saying to Imam Hussain that you can come over here and you can lead us and we will follow you and everything. But when he went over there, things were completely different, right? So there was a certain time period in which information did not come to him. For example, of the governor changing and the whole repercussions of it on the entire movement of revolt, right? So the more that you are informed about many things, the better you'll be able to cope with them. Now, I can understand why Imam Hussain wasn't informed about it. Maybe, obviously, at that time, getting one message from one place to another was always very difficult, right? So it would take a lot of days, a matter of days, rather than a matter of hours even, right? In today's world, however, this excuse just falls apart of not being informed, right? Because there are a lot of sources of information that you are exposed to. So the more informed you are about your own perspective, about the logistics of everything, the better you'll be able to kind of plan ahead. So the third point that I could gain from this incident was that when you kind of move forward with your strong beliefs, right? Or when you kind of move forward with a certain goal in mind, which is kind of polarizing, what's going to happen at the end is you'll find that many people who claim to support you will not do so. And the reason for that is basically that many people have different motivations, right? So, for example, in the case of Kufa, what happened was that the governor enforced certain rules and regulations that were not in place before that, right? So the people over there who were sympathetic to Imam Hussein's cause found that the way that they acted, or the way that they in some ways supported Imam Hussain, was contrary to their well-being at that certain point. So you have to make sure that when you are when you see the people that are around you, you have to always keep in mind that they have their own motivations, right? That they have their own incentives for doing certain things. So, for example, if you are paying someone, maybe they are more incentivized to work for you, right? If you are not paying someone that much, they are not incentivized to work in your favor. Now, the fourth point over here is a more general kind of point, and it points towards the overall lack of community or lack of communication that we have among different sections of the Muslim population. So imagine a community which has a certain kind of belief around very similar things, right? They have similar beliefs about similar things. And there is a certain point that they might disagree on. Now, some members of the population might try to fight against this other perspective, right? So these are basically two people of the same population, but they're fighting over a certain perspective. And at a certain point, at a point, what happens is that maybe violence creeps into their conduct. Now, because violence has major repercussions both physically and socially in our lives and psychologically as well, the result is always that these factions kind of drive each other apart even more, and at the end, they kind of separate. And that is the basis of sectarianism, that we understand and we kind of have a consensus over certain beliefs, but when violence becomes an intermediary at a certain point, we'll feel as if that the other person is our enemy. And that drives the entire change, the internal change. And that's not just restricted to the case in Muslims. You can also observe this in Christianity and how the Protestant church and the Catholic church have major differences between them because of the violence that ensued between them. So in the modern day, many people claim to follow Imam Hussain. Many people claim to follow these classic Islamic teachings. But what they do not understand is that it's not just about belief, it's also about trying to act on those beliefs. So if we take a look at the whole schism between Yazid and Imam Hussain, we'll find that Imam Hussain and the people who represented Yazid, they tried to come to a common ground at a certain point. But because of the violence that was initiated, this was completely blown out of the water. And unfortunately, in modern times, we are so much likely and so easily forgiving to this action of just completely disregarding information that goes against our narrative, right? So for example, some other person might have a perspective which differs from us, and their perspective might actually be more reality-based than ours. But we are so convinced in the way that we believe over things that we consider ourselves to be the major authority over that thing, right? So that leads to radicalism, and at the end of the day, it could lead to violence as well. And so the fragmentation continues. So if there's anything that we can really absorb from this whole incident, it's that understanding how human nature makes us human and understanding how we could be wrong about many things. So with that being said, I hope that you're doing well, and until next time, take care. Thank you.